Ladies and gentlemen, Instant Reaction segment number 17 features Kevin Willard departing Seton Hall for the University of Maryland head coaching position for the men's basketball program. Alongside my guys, Mike Szabo, Josh Adams, and Jaden Daly, I'm Joey Jarzynka. We've got a real good one for you here on this Monday evening. Josh Adams, good to see you, sir. How is that 3 a.m. story writing regarding Kevin Willard departing Seton Hall feeling for you today?
Sometimes it just pays off to be an insomniac, Joey. What kind of, Jaden could probably attest to.
Yeah, I had to break the Masiello news back in 2014 at like 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
Not fun.
Unbelievable. Yep. Unbelievable. What we can tell everyone is that after a disappointing loss for Seton Hall, as the 8th seed, they lost the number 9 seed TCU out in San Diego in the first round of the NCAA tournament here in 2022. And there were some comments that were made in the press conference afterwards that it became very indicative that Kevin Willard's time at Seton Hall was beginning to wind down. And a couple of questions that were asked, I believe, by our friend Zach Braziller as well from the New York Post. Jaden, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is something that was a little bit of controversial quote by Kevin Willard. Something that he said regarding, he basically endorses Shaheen Holloway, the current St. Peter's head coach, who's going to the Sweet 16, and so are you. Kevin Willard endorsed him to take over his spot, and that was pretty much said it all right then and there. Was that wrong?
It can be taken in either of two ways, Joe. Between Willard and Shaheen Holloway, who was on his staff for so many years, almost 10 years between Seton Hall and Iona before he took the job at St. Peter's back in 2018. Yeah. It could be seen as a passing of the torch and a way of maintaining continuity. But I could also see it on the other end where St. Peter's is still playing in the tournament, and you really shouldn't be doing that to just avoid a distraction. Not that Szabo would be distracted by it. He's the most composed coach of anybody I've ever covered. Seriously, I think we could all take lessons from him and not letting stuff get to us. But, yeah, I don't know if Kevin should have done that in the heat of the moment, but that's Kevin Willard. He's always been a straight shooter, for better or worse, where he'll say what's on his mind and maybe not be cognizant of whether or not he's stepping at the present moment. So I see it on one end and I see it on the other end, and I also know it's just Kevin being Kevin, where he kind of wants what's best for the program, even though there were reports that he and Szabo were not exactly enamored with each other toward the end. There was a falling out between the two of them after the Taurian Thompson incident. But yes, Willard trying to put the program first and wanting what's best for the program came out. And I can see it on both ends. It's just a matter of how seriously you're taking it and how offended you are by it, endorsing a sitting coach before he's eliminated.
Yeah, and obviously, a lot of folks in the media, Josh, were not too fond of it. There were a lot of articles that had come out with it saying that, this open endorsement is, it's pretty much saying that he didn't really try against TCU. He was really, 1 foot out the door out in San Diego. But apparently, according to Zach Braziller today in an article that he posted, that apparently Kevin let his entire roster and his entire locker room know on Monday morning that he was taking the job prior to the 9:05 announcement by the University of Maryland Athletic Communications Office. For you, what do you see with that before we, get into the history of Seton Hall with Kevin Willard, of course?
Well, Joey, I think that what we saw last night is that actually TCU is a heck of a good team. I mean, they pushed Arizona, the number 1 seed, into overtime, and on a controversial last-second call, they could have won that game in regulation. So I think that makes the blowout, Seton Hall's first-round blowout, a little more, you can stomach that a little more better when you realize how I think TCU, Jamie Dixon, for what it's worth, had that team ready to play in the NCAA tournament. That said, Seton Hall obviously wasn't ready, and I don't think that the players really were I don't think shock and awe went through the room when Willard walked in and said, "Hey, I'm going to Maryland." I think that, people were reading the tea leaves, and I think the players, especially the players who have been there for a while, like Roden and Kale, the fact that Roden fouled out with 12 minutes left in the second half of the NCAA game, you never see that with Roden. Yeah. So it seemed like the players were checked out. You could kind of tell we were all at the Big East tournament. They were running on fumes against Georgetown and then absolutely had nothing in the tank against UConn. And that carried over into the NCAA tournament. So I don't know if the performance against TCU is indicative of the players, kind of knowing, or if Willard was checking out. But, this season came to a close. This season was done. There was no tournament run in them.
Yeah, and also what I remember, Josh, we said this a few times actually in a few previous instant reaction pieces that you and I have taped against Georgetown. They barely won 57-53, and they were also out rebounded, and they were pretty much dominated against Connecticut, both on the boards and really on the floor. The scoreboard doesn't say that much, regardless of the 10-point loss. And then against TCU, you saw Kadari Richmond had a couple of positive spurts in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, then it just went downhill from there. For you, Mike Szabo, I want to ask you, one of our guys here at the Eastern Observer. You're an outsider in all of this since you cover St. John's all the time, and we don't want to, really put them into this conversation much, but you cover them, and a little bit about Seton Hall, and for you to see that comment in addition to the press conference afterwards. What were your initial thoughts regarding Kevin Willard and potentially, talking a bit about Shaheen Holloway while he's still playing in the tournament?
Well, I think nobody's ever going to feel good about that. But I think to what Josh was saying about reading the tea leaves, I think it's basically saying the quiet part out loud. I think we've seen what's been going. We've seen the rumors the last couple of days, the last couple of weeks, and it all fits. Holloway being on Willard's staff all those years, of course, Holloway, a former point guard at Seton Hall as well. It all fits like a nice jigsaw puzzle. So, but the problem was, Willard said the quiet part out loud, and with St. Peter's still having to play in the tournament, it will rub people it will rub people the wrong way. Yeah. So, in the grand scheme of things, is it that huge? No, it's just an annoyance for St. Peter's to have to go through that, kind of shield their players and of course Holloway away from that while they still have a big game against Purdue in the Sweet 16 in this historic run for them. But I think it just really continues the norm for Seton Hall. I think, Willard's really built in a culture there, and you bring in a guy that basically handing in the torch, as Jaden said, of a guy who knows how Willard operates, knows the program in Seton Hall really well. And the guy who, he's really experienced that coaching as well, running his own program. This is not a promotion or anything like that from within. Holloway's gone out, been able to show he's able to run his own program, had a successful year like this. And I think it's just going to pick up where Seton Hall is left off.
Yeah, and you bring up about, promotion from within, not the case, but, kind of promotion from within, since technically he is Seton Hall royalty. He was a part of the 2000 Sweet 16 team. I want to ask the two guys in the bottom, Josh Adams and Jaden Daly. The two of you have covered Seton Hall a lot longer than I have combined, and you guys have been a part of Kevin Willard much of his term here in South Orange. And Jaden, I want to start with you, because this is a team that was pretty much a laughingstock after, 2000, 2005, 2006, and then 2010 rolled around, and, there was finally some normalcy for this Pirates program that is no longer a laughingstock. They are a national competitor. What was it that Kevin really, what did he do to put this team back on the map?
Well, Joe, I don't buy into the notion that Seton Hall was a laughingstock after Bobby Gonzalez got fired in 2010. There was just some bad timing with the NIT game when Herb Pope low blow to Texas Tech player. But Bobby left Kevin a lot of pieces for his first couple of years. He underachieved in year one and got to the NIT year two with a team that probably should have made the NCAA tournament with Jordan Theodore and Herb Pope. Willard struggled his first few years, and he really didn't find his footing until the Whitehead, Delgado, Carrington, Desi Rodriguez class found its way in back in 2014. They had a rough freshman year. Then their sophomore year, they won the Big East. The following year, Miles Powell came in and really kept the mojo going. So Kevin had a very rough first 4 or 5 years, and Josh can vouch for this too because he was still covering Seton Hall back then, where 14-15, it looked like Willard was going to get fired. And Kevin, to his credit, was upfront about it the following year at Big East Media Day. And he said he spoke to Pat Lyons, the former AD at the time, who has since been promoted, where Pat stuck his neck out for him and put his faith in him for one more year. And it turned out to be the year that Seton Hall won the Big East. So Willard, with that recruiting class, really found his way. It wasn't easy, but getting the high-level players, getting Whitehead, getting Delgado, Carrington, Rodriguez, was what really set the ship back on the right track.
Yeah, Josh, you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, Jaden and I have covered Kevin through thick and thin, and there was a lot of thin when we first started covering Seton Hall. Prior to the Whitehead class, the Whitehead, Delgado, and Rodriguez class, he was sort of getting guys from that. What was the name of that basketball academy that Harold's Carlos came from, and Patrick Alda? What was the name of that one, Jaden? Do you remember? It was this weird basketball academy that he would kind of poach this foreign talent that really wasn't that good, and he was getting really kind of not getting recruits at all. But then Whitehead sort of came along, and he kind of sold his soul a little bit with Whitehead because he had to put Tiny Morton on the staff, Whitehead's coach, and whole thing seemed a little out of sorts. People kind of shook their head at how a five-star recruit somehow ended up at Seton Hall. But with that, I think Kevin's hallmark, though, is that the players like Delgado and Rodriguez, who weren't very widely thought of as great recruits, he turned them into great college players, and he's got a track record of that. And I think that's one thing that probably sold the Terps on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is the this is the thing that a lot of Terps fans on Twitter and on social media have been discussing, Jaden, where I want to end this off with you here since you'll be departing in a few moments. But for the Terps, they get a successful head coach, one that has not coached at this high of level. They've got a whole bunch of elevated resources, upgraded resources compared to what Seton Hall has. They play in the Big Ten. It's a Power Five. It's a Power Five conference, and you have this. Again, I don't want to call the Big East lower than the Big Ten. I mean, it is. The competition is a little bit less. We saw it this year, but again, this is a man that will probably have a couple of bumps in the road before he gets some recognition and positive recognition down in College Park. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think he's going to have it a little easier than Mark Turgeon did, just because he's not the guy replacing the guy. That was Turgeon's biggest issue. He had to live in the shadow of Gary Williams, who raised the program up after Lefty Driesell took it to great heights in the 70s and early 80s, and then won a national championship in 2002. Maryland has a fan base that demands, and Josh can back me up on this, demands greatness from all coaches and players, no matter who they are or what year they're in. And having grown up watching Maryland in the ACC with Joe Smith and with Steve Francis and Juan Dixon, those were the days that Maryland fans got accustomed to, and those are the days that they don't want to leave. I think Willard will eventually, and Josh has a different viewpoint on this than I do, I think Willard will find his way, especially with his style, which is very well suited for the Big Ten. When you look at teams like Wisconsin, teams like Rutgers, teams like Michigan State, I think it's going to be a successful marriage after the second or third year. He might have a rough first year. Depends on what he does with his staff. I think Tony Skinn, if he gets him, will be excellent for recruiting in the D.C. area. I heard David Cox, the former Rhode Island coach, is in consideration as well. So if Kevin gets the right pieces around him, I have faith in him. I really do.
Well, I mean, that's definitely some positive thoughts. But before we get to Josh, Jaden, will let you go. We know you have to roll. So, Jaden, thank you for coming on here and spending the first 15 minutes with us here on Instant Reaction, buddy. Appreciate it.
And brother, always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jaden. All right, we'll talk to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jaden Daly from Daily Dose of Hoops, managing editor and founder. So now it's just the three of us here, Josh. So, so you can follow up on what Jaden had said.
Joey, Mike, I don't know. I've lived in both areas. I've lived in Maryland, and obviously I live here in New Jersey now. So kind of doing the reverse Kevin Willard in my adult life these days. I can tell you that Terps fans are vicious. Jaden's right on the point that it's much easier to not be the guy that follows the guy, which is why I think John Shire is going to have a real tough time next year at Duke, or Hubert Davis did in North Carolina. Yeah. But that being said, Lefty Driesell, when he was coach, and this is way before you guys' time, Lefty Driesell, who was the coach before Gary Williams, said he aspired to call Maryland the UCLA of the East. And that's what they aspired to build in Maryland. And Lefty built a great program, but of course, tragedy with Len Biastein right after he got drafted, which had Lefty Driesell, kind of exit stage left to James Madison. Gary Williams takes over. There's a little history of the Maryland program. Gary Williams takes over, struggles for a little bit, but because he's an alumni, he has a lot. They give Bob Wade actually takes over for a year, who was the coach of Dunbar, and he was a disaster. So after Bob Wade, I think it was a year or two, Gary Williams takes over. 2 years of really struggling, but then he gets Joe Smith. Joe Smith kind of elevates the program. Then Steve Francis comes in. But Maryland really doesn't have any kind of postseason success until there's players like Juan Dixon and Steve Blake, who are not very highly recruited. But Gary sees them. Gary sees the talent. He works with them. That Lonnie Baxter, Gary Smith. Steve Blake, Juan Dixon team. They're the ones who ended up in the Final Four. We're up 28 on Duke, but end up losing. And the next year they beat Indiana. Those teams, the recruits, they weren't far 5-star recruits, but that's the thing why I think Kevin Willard can succeed is because of that track record that he does have at Seton Hall. It's kind of like a Gary Williams track where, you're not going to get the best. You could get a good recruit, great recruit like Joe Smith or an Isaiah Whitehead one year, and that could be a catalyst. But, it's the kind of the meat and potatoes players that both Gary Williams and Kevin Willard really have a good track record of developing.
Yeah, and that is high praise from you there. To have those two in the same sentence, that's definitely something that Kevin Willard, I'm assuming, is going to be, looking up to, aspiring to. But speaking in terms of looking up, I want to go towards what Kevin Willard is going to be making. And, not a lot of people talk about what other folks are making, but this year is something pretty darn special. It's a 7-year, $29.4 million salary or his contract is 7 years, $29.4 million with a $100,000 escalator every single season. That's some pretty good stuff, especially when his base salary was $2.4 million here. He's got a tall task ahead of him. Mike, I want to go to you here. This, again, from what we have seen on social media with, I've seen this morning, folks, the top comment on the Welcome Willard Twitter post, 9:05 a.m. was a few fans saying we're canceling our season ticket. I think that's completely ludicrous, and especially what Kevin Willard has done up here at Seton Hall. What do you say to those fans? Speaking to the fan perspective here.
Well, I think that Kevin Willard just has had a really great record at Seton Hall. Bar none. People can make the whole argument of, he only had one NCAA tournament win in his 12 years, but he turned Seton Hall from a team that was, bottom of the Big East, languishing, looking back at its glory days from way back when. He brought them back into a perennial tournament contender and a Big East title contender. Was it the last 4 out of 5 years making the NCAA tournament as well? So, you have a guy coming in Maryland, a Maryland program that's really struggled lately. And then you're now bringing in a guy who at the very least gives you a very high floor. at making a tournament and being that kind of team. And especially in a loaded Big Ten conference, that's a great asset to have. A guy like him who's at least going to make your team competitive at the very minimum. And then you see, a couple of recruits here. Josh mentioned his record of development as well, developing players. And you never know, you wind up maybe getting into the NCAA tournament on a more consistent basis than what Maryland have been, and maybe he reels off a couple of wins depending on how things go. I do think they're in it for the long haul, Maryland. This is a 7-year contract that they're giving him. They know there's a bit of a rebuilding process, a bit of a grace period that there's going to be in this whole process, but he's the guy for the job. He did it with Seton Hall. Iona, to a certain extent, he did it with building them up as well, and then handing the keys off to Tim Cluess, and now it's over to Rick Pitino. And he did the same thing with Seton Hall and building them up. I don't see why he wouldn't be able to do it with Maryland as well.
Well, we'll just see what, in terms of time and in terms of patience, what the Terps fans has, and especially what Josh did say, the UCLA of the East is what, a few folks have brought up in the past. And for that, again, UCLA of the East is that's not a sentence that you want to say out loud, because if you say that in front of some other fans, that it's definitely not, that's no, not good. Josh,
well,
next.
There is a UCLA of the East, but they're outside of Philadelphia, and Jay Wright's their coach. So,
exactly. Right. Yeah. So that's again something that the Terps fans do not want to hear. But let's keep moving on here, though, guys. And you look back at what Kevin Willard has accomplished over at Seton Hall. He's ranked number 2 in terms of all-time wins as a Seton Hall coach, and he's only was 69 wins away from becoming tying John Honey Russell, who had 18 seasons at the helm. He surpassed, of course, the great PJ Carlesimo, of course, in the early 90s when he brought them to the national championship game. The big thing, though, is that, again, he leaves with 225 victories. The second all-time winningest coach in Seton Hall program history. And there is, again, some chatter that we would expect to officially happen. We don't know when, probably in the next month or two. Once Shaheen Holloway is done in March Madness in the NCAA tournament, I would say it's safe to say that, and thankfully this is a recording so we can go back and edit this if anything, Josh, but I would say that Brian Felt, the athletic director who hired Shaheen Holloway over at St. Peter's, probably has a little bit more green in his Seton Hall wallet as opposed to the St. Peter's wallet, where he might be able to send over a limo and kind of take him away for a little bit and figure a few things out for the next coaching hire, which I think that's pretty much a slam dunk, no pun intended.
Or at least an Uber XL, if not a limo, to Jersey City to pick up Shaheen Holloway. Yeah, there's it seems like it's just going to be a natural progression. I can think that St. Peter's is kind of looking like the Scranton Wilkes-Barre to the Seton Hall Yankees. St. Peter's been their AAA. They're Felt's from St. Peter's. He's the one who hired Shaheen Holloway at St. Peter's, and now he's over at Seton Hall. St. Peter's AD now was the associate director of athletics at Seton Hall. So this is all seems like a farm program that they're running in Jersey City for Seton Hall. Look, Holloway's one more game that Kevin Willard has in the NCAAs. I mean, it's an inconvenient truth, but it is. And I think you guys have seen the Maryland Twitter, and I've talked to a lot of Terps fans of mine. And granted, everything, is in the moment, but, I've seen a lot of Terps fans go, why are we getting Kevin Willard when we could throw money at Shaheen Holloway instead? And I can't say that I blame them. It's going to be, I think as far as going back sort of circling back to when Willard, at the press conference said that, Shaheen Holloway's here next year, I'll be the happiest guy in the world, whether that'll affect the St. Peter's players or not. I mean, that they've been playing with house money since, the opening tip against Kentucky. So I don't think they expected him back. And especially, they're smart enough to realize that once Kevin took off for Maryland, that Shaheen's on his way over to South Orange. So I don't think it affects them too much, but I'd be interested to see who fills in for Shaheen Holloway at St. Peter's. I've seen longtime Seton Hall associate head coach Grant Billmayer is going to step in for Shaheen. That's the talk to a couple insiders in the program. They say it's Grant's turn to head a program, and here's St. Peter's. Again, the Scranton Wilkes-Barre to the Seton Hall Yankees, the St. Peter's Peacocks. Unfortunately, to this year. The Scranton Wilkes-Barre Yankees, the Scranton Wilkes-Barre team has eclipsed the major team, and they're in the Sweet 16. So strange sport we're going to cover, guys. What can I say?
It's nuts to say too. Again, when you see that, that Shaheen Holloway has 2 victories already, one against Kentucky, another against Murray State. Mike, is this a flash in the pan, or does Shaheen Holloway have what it takes to build a winner at Seton Hall?
I believe he does. We look at this year because of how much it stood out really with St. Peter's. But was it the 3rd, 4th year that he's been with St. Peter's? You've seen a natural progression really of them showing progress. They continued to rise in the table in the MAC and ran the table this year. They were a really good team last year. Just came up short. Once again, this year, they're really good. Once again, they really found their form late on in the season, ran through the MAC tournament. And then there's just been a natural progression where Holloway has gotten better. His teams in his 3.5 or so years at St. Peter's have always been tougher to play against. That sort of blue-collar mentality of they may not be the best, but they're certainly going to give you a tough out. Now, going over to Seton Hall, more resources. He knows the program well. Very good recruiter as well. I know we've mentioned off air a lot of what Seton Hall has done lately and who they've brought in lately. Shaheen Holloway has a large hand in that. So he's a proven recruiter and he knows the program well. I believe he'll succeed.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but Shaheen Holloway has had his hands all over the recruiting of Isaiah Whitehead, Miles Bowman, all of these different players. And just by looking at their roster now, obviously there's a ton of transfers. As you brought up Taurian Thompson as well, that I remember a couple of years ago, that was something that was very, 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 that did not sit well in a lot of people's hands for sure. After that whole disaster happened, and Shaheen was one of the lead recruiters on that one. But, again, you look at the guys in the Kadeen Carrington, Desi Rodriguez days, his hands were all over that. And the success that Seton Hall has had, Holloway's, his DNA is injected in there, not only for the fact that he was a player, and, one of the star players back in 2000, but, his recruiting senses are very good, and he's looking up to his predecessor and his former boss. So now I guess we kind of have to say this, Josh. When am I going to be seeing you in person for this press conference that we expect to have?
I expect it, could be as soon as next week, from what I understand, depending on St. Peter's Sweet 16 Elite 8 prospects. But, tomorrow Maryland's they're having an open press conference to announce Kevin Willard. So as of now, as of tomorrow at 5:00, Kevin Willard's officially Maryland's head basketball coach, and there's a vacancy at Seton Hall, and I have expected as soon as St. Peter's, hey, I know we're all rooting for the underdog here, so we want this thing to continue as long as possible. But I think when it finally finishes, I maybe give it 72 hours before Shaheen Holloway is going to be announced as the Seton Hall head coach. And it's as you're saying, Joey, you would see with like Carrington and Delgado and Rodriguez, and after Holloway became the head coach of the Peacocks, he occasionally would show up at Seton Hall, and those players would go over to him, they'd hug him, they love that guy. His players now, they love that guy. You can see it. They reflect him. Those guys would run through a brick wall for him. You see it in the press conferences, kind of the quiet confidence that he has. He can be boisterous if he wants to, but he's the greatest. I swear, I've seen a lot of interviews, but that game after Kentucky where he's getting interviewed and the reporter goes, "You don't even look nervous." And he goes, "Why? It's just basketball."
Yeah.
I mean, you just had the greatest win of your entire career. And you just go, not nervous, just basketball. I mean, that kind of stuff just plays so well with everybody. And so I'm very bullish on the future of Seton Hall with Shaheen Holloway. I think they could go further than what Willard brought them to. Whatever. And Holloway, it's almost, if I were his agent, I go, you could probably get a lot more money next year from, we could play the hypothetical game here, but St. John's is another 500 or less season. You guys wouldn't want Shaheen Holloway over there at coaching at Carnesecca Arena next season. I mean, come on. I mean, he'd be the hottest commodity in the nation after this run.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And again, there's plenty of openings all around, but as you said, that there's no doubt probably within 72 hours of St. Peter's either falling or winning the whole thing, that his tenure over in Jersey City would be done. Josh and Mike, another thing too, I want to bring up here. Josh first, just because there's a lot more history with you here with this program, but the big thing that actually Mike and I spoke about off camera too is the fact that there's a lot of similarities in some of the recruits, obviously, that Willard brings in, that Shaheen Holloway brings in, whatever, very similar, great minds think alike in that regard. So we have not seen any, on social media or anything along those lines where Seton Hall players would be transferring, which is a good sign, of course, which means that there's a, decent locker room. They're not unhappy. There's whatever. And a whole bunch of guys just left. Miles Kale, Jared Roden, Ike Obiagu are done. That's it. Their Seton Hall careers or their collegiate careers are finished. Bryce Aiken as well. Is there any sense of, if Shaheen Holloway were to get this job, or if and when he does, that there would be some transfers that would potentially depart Seton Hall? Or is it, he will just inherit this tight-knit locker room and just continue what Kevin left?
I think that's a great question, Joey. Jameer Harris's brother's coming in next year. Brandon Weston. I mean, there's guys that are Kevin Willard's recruits, and whether they follow him down to Maryland or not will be an interesting thing. I'm not sure how many roster spots the Terps have available next season, but certainly there's going to be room for at least a couple in the transfer portal. As so far as the kind of the core players coming back. I think Kadari Richmond will thrive in a Shaheen Holloway type system. He's a tough as nails point guard. He proved it this year playing with that hand injury. Holloway's one of those guys who all he needs to do is get you in a room, start talking to you, and you want to play for him. When I was talking with him at St. Peter's earlier this year, I was just like, I got to check my eligibility. Maybe they need. I could have 6 fouls to give with the Peacocks this year, but unfortunately, no longer eligible. But Holloway's one of those guys that I think anyone who's kind of on the fence, maybe like a Trey Jackson or someone like that. He's well known. He's a well known commodity in this area and with Seton Hall and I. So who knows? Who knows? Maryland's a pretty attractive place to play. So I can see, players considering it. They have a brand new basketball facility that I think is going to be built by the end of this year, next year. A really nice facility. Under Armour built it. The founder of Under Armour is from Maryland. So, it's going to be super nice. So that might lure a couple players. But I think all in all, I think it's going to be little bit of turnover, but not much with the Pirates.
Mike Szabo, I got to ask you this question, of course, as we begin to wrap up. Next year, Big East Media Day, we're going to be seeing a ton of new faces. Of course, you're going to be seeing Sean Miller over at Xavier. You're going to be seeing some, probably going to be seeing Shaheen Holloway, and there's going to be a ton of media focused on him and Sean Miller. Obviously the former, not in 100% good graces, but the latter, good things here in March Madness. Do you see this Maryland team potentially finishing? Do they get into the tournament this upcoming season?
It's not impossible to see. We've seen in this tournament. Look at Iowa State. We're an 11 seed this year. They won 2 games all of last year. And they make a turnaround this year, whether it's the transfer portal, bringing new recruits, development in general, and now they're into the Sweet 16. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they could turn things around for sure, depending on who else Willard can bring in. The transfer portal is now a huge factor more than ever, and the continued development there. So I wouldn't be surprised if they can contend, although I tend to lean more toward that this is going to be a little bit of a project, and I expect them to contend a little bit more in year 2 or 3 of Willard, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens right away.
And for Seton Hall, Josh, they were projected to finish 5th in the Big East Conference last season, or 2022, I guess this past season, if you want to call it 21-22. That was under Kevin Willard's tutelage. Now, with whoever may be coming in, again, wink, wink, Holloway, what do you see in 2022-23 for this Pirates team?
I think UConn's going to be really, really strong next year. So I have UConn. I think Creighton's going to be, Creighton's going to be loaded coming back. Villanova, as we all know, is going to be great. Lewis and Marquette's going to have another year under their belt. I think Seton Hall's going to be 5th, probably. Seton, 5th. I'm forgetting about Providence as well. It's a loaded conference next year. Who knows with St. John's if Posh comes back, if Julian, I think Julian's going to probably take off. So, he seemed pretty, upset after the last game, in the Big East tournament. So, I think they're going to be a tournament team next year. I think they're definitely going to be an NCAA tournament team next year. Whether they improve on this year or not is to be determined. But I personally like the evolution of Kadari Richmond at point guard. I think he's going to be an all Big East by the end of next season. And I'd like to see the one player, Trey Jackson, who, again, I think was underutilized by Willard. I think Willard didn't play him enough. There were games where he'd only have like 12 or 14 minutes and he'd score 12 or 14 points. And you go, well, why didn't he play it anymore? And it was, again, I think Willard had a lot of problems with rotations this year, especially after Bryce Aiken was hurt. He couldn't figure out the right rotations. Personally, I think Holloway is probably going to be a little better with that. So, yeah, I think 4th or 5th, third being third's the ceiling. I just think UConn's loaded next year and Creighton's going to be loaded. So those would be my my number 1 and 2. But yeah, Seton Hall's going to be a tournament team, no doubt. And if Kevin Willard doesn't reach the tournament his first year at Maryland and Seton Hall does with Shaheen Holloway, guys, they're a vicious crowd down there. I like to tell. I was telling Jaden this in text the other day, but I guess the best way to describe Maryland fans is that Maryland fans, they're the kids there, their parents tell them about a Final Four run. St. John's, their grandparents tell them about a Final Four run. So it's a little closer, but it's just as vicious, when it comes to how they view how successful their program should be. It's a vicious crowd down there, man. I hate to say this because we're, Joey, you and I did a lot of games. We sat in a lot of press conferences, but Willard had a very easy kind of existence with the press here in New Jersey. He really, really did. Aside from like the back and forth that he'd have with Zach, which was more or less tongue in cheek, kind of an act. He'd lose, but we all kind of knew that it was either going to be the schedule. You could count on him saying like, well, the schedule makers screwed us, or, we're tired, or back to back, or
the location we played in.
And he really wasn't pressed all that much, and it's my fault just as much. I'm credentialed just like everybody else. I could have pressed him on it when I wanted to, and I didn't. But Maryland, they're very aggressive when your coach isn't winning, and that's what happened to Turgeon. He just got burnt out in the middle of the season. He couldn't take it anymore, and he just walked.
Yeah.
So
that's a scary thing.
I don't know if Kevin can do that, honestly. Kevin's a very private person, a very private person. And Maryland, you're front and center in that state. You're the highest paid employee in that state. It's a state school. People really do care. You got a little big money. You got Scott Van Pelt sitting at courtside every game and shouting you out on SportsCenter. You got to win down there. It's intense. And I don't know if Kevin can do that. That's my doubt about it. I really don't know.
Oh, wow. That is definitely a little bit of don't want to call it a bombshell, but definitely a big comment there or a big statement there from you, Josh, because again, it's, the rebuild, not rebuilding, but the retooling project is definitely something that Terps fans, again, the patience we brought up before, but I did not know with SVP with Scott Van Pelt. I didn't know that he sits that he's there courtside. I had no idea.
Yeah, he moved his SportsCenter down to DC just so he could go to Terps games.
Yeah,
I mean, look, it's intense. You have Cal Ripken, you have the founder of Under Armour, you have the owner of the Ravens, and you have Scott Van Pelt all sitting courtside for every Terps game. So they're the four biggest boosters for the Terps programs.
Yeah.
You either win, they're the ones putting up the cash. You either win or you're gone. And it is an intense existence down there. It burnt Gary Williams out, he retired. It burnt Mark Turgeon out, he retired.
Well, you know what?
Credit
to Kevin Willard if he can get through the 7-year contract that will kick in starting tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern time. But well, that's really something else to see that obviously Kevin Willard on his way out from Seton Hall tomorrow or 5 p.m. tonight. We're going to put this up on Tuesday morning, but 5 p.m. tonight, it will be the press conference for Kevin Willard being introduced as the next University of Maryland Terrapins head coach. And that is going to be a big deal all over to see what Kevin discusses, what Kevin talks about. We will see. And also the questions too. You'll get a feel from the press too, because we can only imagine those folks in the DMV also. It's not the New York media, but Josh, I think you can attest to this too. They're not as vicious, but depending on who you talk to or what you hear, especially with, folks that cover the Terps, mm-hmm. They might be just as vicious as New York media.
They are. They're Tony Kornheiser, Michael Wilbon, they're a Washington Post, John Feinstein, Washington Post. I mean, they're seasoned reporters down there. They don't take crap. They're as big as the coaches down there. So, they'll put Willard on blast. I mean, Willard enjoyed kind of an anonymous existence in New Jersey. He could go out for dinner and no one would bug him. Maryland, he'll have security guards all around him when he's down in Annapolis having a crab feast. I mean, I just don't know because he's a private guy. Like if he's gonna thrive in this type of thing. So I wish him the best. I do. I don't know him. Like I'm not gonna miss him because I don't know him. You never know these guys. I admire what he did with the program, but I don't know Kevin Willard. After 11 years covering him, I don't know him. I'm not his friend. He seems like a good enough dude, but I do wish him the best. And we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting year. And when he comes up and plays Rutgers next season, with those Terps, boy, that's going to be a can't miss event in New Jersey.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt. And I can guarantee you all New York media, in addition to New Jersey media, will be down at Jersey Mike's Arena or AKA to cover Kevin's New Jersey homecoming, not his homecoming up at Seton Hall, but his homecoming down south a little bit, down at Piscataway. Ladies and gentlemen, for Mike Szabo and College Hoops Digest's managing editor and founder Josh Adams, Joey Jarzynka here for all of us here at the Eastern Observer. We will see you next time here on Instant Reaction segment number 17. Good night, everybody.